Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Lunch with Books. Please turn off your cell phones if you have them on. If you're interested in the America 250 edition of the Upper Ohio Valley Historical Review, it is in print and only $5 up here. There are articles about the sieges of Fort Henry and statehood and other things.
And can they pay someone at the desk? Is that?
Yeah, you can get them at the Circ desk also, $5, or just give me the $5 and I'll use it for my vacation. Next week, I'm kidding, of course. On July 21, the Wheeling Poetry Series continues with Zina Azam. She's a Palestinian-American poet and was former poet laureate of the city of Alexandria, Virginia. And that, of course, is curated by our friend Mark Harshman. That is next week on the 21st. And then, it's Wheel Vegas week. If you saw the sign upstairs, how many saw the sign upstairs? Yeah. Well, go check it out. Our friend Nan worked hard on that. On July 28th, pianist and vocalist Jay Daniels will sing Frank Sinatra's Resume from 1966, That's Life, it's called. And then, on the 4th of August, the troubadour, Bob Gaudio, will be back, and he'll sing songs by Neil Diamond, who did Vegas in 1972. So there you go. Now, we're all here for a reason, and that reason is the Singing Sisters of Mount St. Joseph, yeah? And that will be presented, yes. Please hold your applause till the end. Charles A. Julian, Ph.D., is a Wheeling native who grew up in both South Wheeling and Warwood, much like Eleanor Stever. He went to Warwood High School, graduate of 1971. He earned degrees from Glenville State University, University of Sheffield, yes, in England, on a Rotary International Fellowship, the George Peabody College for Teachers at Vanderbilt University, and Florida State University. That's a lot of universities, Chuck. Within the field of library and information science, he's taught undergraduate classes, worked in library administrations, headed library departments, written grants and proposals, intellectual property efforts, primarily for higher education. And after 42 plus years as a library information professional, Chuck retired in 2019 and returned to Wheeling from WVU Kaiser campus. All that said, here is Chuck Julian.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Sean. It's a pleasure to be here, and we're going to hear some music too, but not Frank Sinatra later on. It's a pleasure to be here and tell you all about some of the things I found out about the Singing Sisters of St. Joseph and how that came about. Any of you who have come to my presentations know there are some general kinds of things I do at the beginning, and so the very first slide is my usual standard disclaimer, so I don't want to go to jail. I'm still too young to go to jail, so I'll try not to read too much from the slides, but I'll read this out to you. The opinions expressed in this presentation related to the materials presented and or distributed are solely those of the presenter and not necessarily those of the Diocese of Wheeling-Charleston, the Congregation of the Sisters of St. Joseph, or the Ohio County Public Library, its employees, or members of its board of directors. Images and or information are covered by copyright laws and regulations, and all material presented is solely for educational purposes. Please respect and abide by copyright regulations. Two other disclaimers. I have never studied Latin. You will see some Latin and names but I'm sure there are people in this room who have. And I am not Catholic, so I am dyed-in-the-wool Protestant all my life, but so if there are any Catholic denominational theological questions, I'm sure there are other people here in the room who can respond to that. I just have a quick story about that. I once was going to a funeral on the campus of Wheeling Jesuit. I think it was a sister of the Visitation who had died. They were having a funeral mass there. I was dressed much like this. Once I retired, I stopped putting a tie on. And walking across campus, and two sisters were walking across, headed the same way I was, and one sister looked at me and said, "Good morning, Father." And Sister Joanne Gaunter was with her, and she said, no, he's not a priest, he's a Protestant. There are a lot of thank yous that I have to express, and these are people who helped provide materials to me. I am going to read this. They're from the Congregation of St. Joseph in Wheeling, the Congregation of St. Joseph's Archives, which are in Cleveland, the Diocese of Wheeling-Charleston Archives, Marshall University Special Collections, the Ohio County Public Library Digital Newspapers Database, the Barter Theater Archives at Virginia Tech Library, newspapers.com database, Kim Randolph Lacasano, who is sitting right here today and is the daughter of Jack Randolph, who we will be talking about, and Margaret Peg Brennan, who is, you all know Margaret Peg Brennan, of course. They all have helped tremendously in gathering up this material. We have special guests with us today, and I need to tell you that the analysis that we've done shows that there are currently 5 active sisters who are still alive with the order who were singing sisters. And there are 5 who are still active serving in the diocese. Now, some of them are healthier than others, but the great news is we have 2 of them with us today. And they are Sister Marguerite O'Brien and Sister Alicia Weiskircher. And don't ask me to pick them out in the pictures in their full habit. I can't do that. We also had some sisters who have left the order, and many of you may know that Margaret Brennan at one time was a sister of St. Joseph, and she was a singing sister of Mount St. Joseph. And Margaret, raise your hand, Margaret's here. And so far as I know, there's no one else in the room who was a singing sister. Is that correct? Oh, yeah, and you were? Sister Marilyn. Oh, let's hear it for Sister Marilyn, too. I had the opportunity to meet with a group of sisters, and one of those persons was Sister Mary Ann Palmer, and she just recently died, and she was a wonderful, giving person. So I wanted to share her picture with you today and also dedicate this program to all of the deceased members, both sisters and other people who were affiliated with this project. So we certainly miss Sister Mary Palmer, and she was a wonderful person. And she was an archivist, too, at one time, so some of this material she helped to collect. So God bless Sister. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today, but if there's something obvious, like I was a sister too, chime in and let me know. We won't have a lot of time to talk about it, but do say, no, you're right or you're wrong. You're wrong there. There's something I need to tell you about. So raise your hand. I've got the reading glasses on. I don't see everyone so clear. But otherwise, we will have time at the end for some questions. Were any of you at the first concert that was at Glessner Auditorium at Ogilvie Park? You were? All right, great. We've got someone who actually went to the concert.
7th grade.
In 7th grade. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So that's super. We'll be talking a bit more about that, but the very first concert was at Glessner Auditorium. It was a packed house, wasn't it? We'll talk about that later, too. All right. So everyone always wants to know with me, well, you're a Protestant. How did you get involved with this? Where did this project come from? So let's talk just a little bit how it happened. When I finished library school, not in 1879, but 1979, I came to my first job at Parkersburg Community College. And I don't know if that... there it is. That's Parkersburg Community College right there. And this lady right here was Sister Barbara Moran. She was a singing sister, but she left the order. And she was my first supervisor in the library at Parkersburg Community College. And she was from the Wheeling area, and she knew I was from the Wheeling area. I didn't stay there very long, but we just happened to be talking about Wheeling one day. And I knew she had been a sister because that information was shared by the staff. And she said one day, I was a singing sister. And that was the first time I had ever heard anything about a singing sister. And do you remember Sister Barbara? Yeah, she was a wonderful person. I'm sure she was a lovely singer. But in the interim, I left. I only stayed there for a couple months, and I left and took another job. And it wasn't until later that Margaret Brennan and we became friends, and we were talking one day, and we were saying something about Barbara Moran. She said, well, I knew Barbara Moran. We were in the Singing Sisters together. I said, well, my goodness, this is like ding, ding, ding. We need to find more out about this. So that was the impetus for finding more about it. And the more I dug around a little bit, the more there were some interesting stories to tell. So let's talk just a little bit about the Sisters of St. Joseph. I'm not going to talk a lot about the Sisters of St. Joseph because you had a presentation here before about them. Of course, that's not someone from the Sisters of St. Joseph. That is the first bishop of the diocese, Reverend Richard Vincent Whalen. He had a hospital to run. He had challenges in the diocese when he first came here. And so he asked that some sisters be sent to help initially to run the hospital. The hospital was going into debt. There were not great personnel at Wheeling Hospital, and he wanted to get it straightened out. So these 4 sisters came to Wheeling. They came from Candelayé, Candelayé. They came from Candelayé, and they where the order was, and that was in 1853. I should get on my slide here where I can read it. They came to take care of the orphans, help the poor, and operate the hospital. And they left Candelayé through St. Louis, Missouri by boat. They traveled down the Mississippi River to Cairo, Illinois, then up the Ohio River to Wheeling. They were joined later by a few more sisters, but they were the nucleus. And they did not have a welcoming reception when they got to town. Their first quarters were at 110 15th Street. That house still exists. It was called the Metcalf property. They weren't supposed to stay there originally. The original landlady, when heard that sisters were coming, that was fine. When she found out they were Catholic sisters in habit, that was not fine. And so she would not house them. And so they had to stay in the attic of this house originally. And ultimately, this house also became the first Wheeling Hospital. So that, and then over to your right is what you see the Wheeling Hospital that was once the Sweeney Mansion in North Wheeling. So any of you to remember the North Wheeling Hospital, that was the nucleus of the hospital, and the sisters stayed there and worked in the hospital. Ultimately, though, they ended up in a bigger facility, and some of you may know in the upper left-hand corner where that is now. Anyone know? That's where Central Catholic High School is now. So there was a convent, there was an academy, and a mother house for the sisters. And over here at the top right is the picture, the photograph of their chapel, of the sisters' chapel there in East Wheeling, which I'm told was just demolished when they took the building down. There was nothing saved from it. So down in the bottom photograph, this is in 1953. They're celebrating the centennial of the sisters, because remember we said they came in 1853. And it was here that the bishop announced that there were going to be plans for a new mother house to be built. And it's the current mother house that's up on Pogue Run Road. There it is. It was dedicated in 1956. And it was built at the cost of $1 million. Now that was a good hunk of change back in 1956. But what happened is, turn my slide here. Moving into that new facility, they incurred a tremendous amount of debt, almost $2 million in debt. It was like $1.8 million in debt. That also was a lot of money back in the 1950s. But you can see from the slide, they got at it, and they found ways to pay the debt down, and within 10 years, it was gone. But as they're building facilities, they're adding sisters to the congregation. And at one time, the highest number we've seen is 250 sisters. There were at one time 250 sisters. And right now, there are about 30. Is that correct, Rose? I believe that in the diocesan directory, it counts to 30 in the diocese.
They're not all living at Mount.
Yes, they're not all at Mount St. Joseph. Yes. Yeah, so that's the difference now. And some of those are in the infirmary also. They are at Mount St. Joseph, of the 30. Correct, okay. So you can see that there was a lot of debt that got paid off, but what happened also with this core of sisters is that they're out there in the medical community, they're out there in the educational community, they've got to be trained. You can't just throw a sister, well, you could at one time put a sister in a school and they could pretty much teach what they wanted. But after a while, accrediting bodies and other bodies said, now wait a minute, or medical bodies said, now wait a minute, we have to educate these people. Well, how do you educate these people? Because the order really pretty much had to take care of its own finances. It wasn't financed by anyone else, so they had to, and the nuns, I'm told, and I'm sure it's true, were not paid exorbitantly for their services throughout the diocese. And this was a little ding, ding, ding strategy of the bishop, by the way. You know, it doesn't cost so much to bring the nuns in and have them work. So there became a need for an educational fund. This is where I'm getting to. There became a need for the educational fund. And with that need, then there were discussions about what can we do to raise some money? What can we do to raise some money for this educational fund, which they ended up calling a vocational and educational fund. So they wanted to fund vocations, getting more sisters into the community, and also educating these sisters. Well, a lot of people thought at the time the two influences were the singing nun. You remember Janine Deckers? Dominica, Nika, on the Ed Sullivan Show. You know, get that out of your mind. And the sisters who were interviewed later said, no, that had nothing to do with it. And also the Broadway opening of The Sound of Music, you know, with Julie Andrews singing, and that had nothing to do with it either. So there's not any relationship there. But there was, in the 1950s, the sisters did produce a record. And it was on the Black Crest Records, and there are still bits of it around. And it was sacred music. So there was a tradition in the order, in the congregation, for a musical group. And indeed, and Black Crest Records, by the way, was James Black. You remember the James Black in town with his audio facilities. And so there was some documentation of that happening. Now, what we don't know, where this gets a little fuzzy, and I'll say it a couple of times, so I'll say it initially now. I would have loved to have been doing the research on this like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when some of these sisters were still alive. Oh, if I could have only spoken to Sister Monica Flynn and some of these people who were really initially involved with putting all this together, she would have been able to say, oh yes, it was this person's idea, and this is how we got it together, and we sorted it all out, and this is how it all fell together. Unfortunately, I can't tell you that. But what I can tell you is that they decided to establish an organization that they called the Friends of St. Joseph. They established it in 1963, and the primary focus of it was to promote interest in and provide financial support to the program for the formation and education of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Wheeling. So initially, they started this organization with the sisters in charge with the hope that ultimately people in the diocese would take over the leadership of it. But the sister up in the newspaper article is Sister Rosaria Robrecht. She was the Mother Superior. And they decided that their first big project was going to be a concert tour. And the concert tour was going to be throughout the diocese, and it was going to raise money, and that the sisters were going to be the singers. The sisters would be the stars. And so the beauty behind this, though, is that a lot of the groundwork, not the music, but a lot of the groundwork was done in all of these locations throughout the diocese by these friends groups. So they sold the ads for the programs. They put the programs together. They sometimes had people get involved with being guest conductors. They also, well, they were really the nuts and bolts behind all of this. They were the driving influence to get this done. So they had memberships. You could join as a associate, sustaining, or a memorial for the living, or perpetual membership for the deceased. If you joined, you were given this prayer card as part of your membership. And it says Memoriare of St. Joseph. Memoriare is remember in Latin. And down at the bottom it says the Recolta, and that Recolta is book of prayers. So this is what you got if you joined, but more importantly, they wanted you to be out there selling tickets and getting people into, and they also probably helped to provide some of the venues where the concerts were held. So the discussions began, I'm sure, I don't have and I relied a lot upon the archives which were in Cleveland, and they're wonderful up there to get things to me. But it's not the same as you're sitting there with a whole group of things in front of you and you can see what's there. So there's really no clear path about how this happened, but I'm sure the bishop was involved. I'm sure that the sisters probably had some sort of council. Is that correct, sisters? You would have had some sort of council to make a decision on this project. There were discussions throughout the congregation about doing this. And so there's Mother Rosario, a better picture. In 1963, she sends a letter out to the congregation announcing that they were hoping to get 35 sisters who would be involved in taking this tour, and that they're going to have tryouts. So initially, the sisters had to audition for the group. Did you have to audition for the group? Do you remember the tryouts? Were they hard? No, they weren't hard. Okay. Now, we will see that in a moment that Kim's father, Jack, gets involved with helping lead the group, but not at the very early stages. At these very early stages, he was not a part of this. He didn't sit in on the tryouts. And the sisters that did on November the 2nd, 1963 were there. This is actually from a bulletin board that was posted. Here are the judges for the tryouts. And I put the names in because I had to figure out who the names were. And so it was Sister Mary Monica Flynn, Sister Mary Edith Lang, and Sister Mary Eileen O'Connor. So they were the judges. And later on, a newspaper article was written that the nuns were all buzzed. Did you make it? Did you make it? Did you make it? So I don't know if everything was a buzz at Mount St. Joseph, but so let's see. I think I missed one somewhere. Oh, nope. Here we go. Yep. Okay. So they ended up in 1964, and there were two tours, 1964 and 1965. In 1964, there were 42 sisters. In 1965, there were 40. So they did more than the 35 sisters. They did 40 sisters. In 1964, they practiced on the weekends. They practiced in two different locations. They practiced in Fairmont and in Wheeling, and then they came together at the Mother House. They practiced for 124 hours on the weekends. All their music had to be memorized. They did not stand on stage with a sheet of music in front of them. And you might think, well, wasn't this a wonderful pastime for the sisters? No, no, no. This was in addition to the sisters' regular duties. So if they were a school teacher and there was a concert Sunday night, they might not get back into Wheeling until what, 2 o'clock in the morning, and have to be in the classroom at 8 o'clock. So this is why there were not 10 tours of sisters singing. Probably 2 nearly wore you all out, I expect, as it was. So what happened, and this is the 1964 group. What happened ultimately is that Sister Mary Monica Flynn and Sister Charlotte Burke were at a music seminar, conference, seminar, workshop, probably is a better, that Jack Randolph was at. And they thought it would be interesting. They were so impressed with his good work that they invited him to come back and work with the sisters. I'm sure they thought he can whip us all into shape so that we can get ready for our tour. Well, and I'm going to read this to you. After a few sessions with the nuns, Mr. Randolph casually remarked, and this came from a newspaper article, "I would like to go on tour with this group." In about as much time as it takes to sing Do Re Mi, the word got back to the Reverend Mother Mary Rosaria, Mother General of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Wheeling, and within a few hours, Mr. Randolph was signed up as director. So that's how Jack Randolph got inserted. And Jack Randolph was a contract worker. He was paid for his work. And he also got part of the revenues of the record sales. And he may be the only one in the whole project, really, who got paid for what he did, because I think everyone else may have... And so here are some of the principals who were involved. There's Jack Randolph. Mother Mary Owen was the second Mother Superior. Mother Rosaria Robrecht began in 64 and 65. Mother Mary Owen came in. Bob Otten, many of you may remember Bob Otten. You've heard him working in the community. He worked with Stone and Thomas for a long, long time. He was active with Wheeling Hockey and the Festival of Lights work. He did a lot of the design work. He staged a lot of things. And then there's Mother Rosaria Robrecht and Bishop Joseph H. Hodges, of course, and Sister Monica Flynn, who was one of the co-directors. The directors sort of moved around back and forth depending on where they were. Jack didn't always direct them. Sometimes he did. Sometimes he directed with other people too. But then he became the guiding force behind a lot of this as far as music goes. Now in the 1965 group, one of the strangest things I saw in the materials that I found, and this was found in Huntington of all places, it was a photograph that had been released for publication, and it was the whole group standing out in the snow. Now you look at those sisters, not all of them are very, very young and spry. Not all of them are dressed very warm, and I don't know if any of you remember this, but why were you in the snow for the group picture in the wintertime? So it's just one of those amazing little things. When they traveled to their concerts, they traveled with custom-made panels that they placed on the stage, and these were designed by Bob Otten. And some of them were worked on by the sisters at the Mother House. And I won't go into all of this, but there's symbolism behind all of this. You can see some of the material that's on your tables. But for each season, there was a different set of these panels. They traveled with a truck around to take them to all the locations and install them. And you'll see when we see some pictures how tall they were. They were very big on the stage. There's a second set in 1965, and it shows some of the sisters standing in front of them. They're singing. That's an actual concert picture, which we don't have many of. Oops. Let's see if I missed one. All right, these are the locations. This is the diocese. This is the Diocese of Wheeling. It hadn't become Wheeling-Charleston at that time. You can see it included down parts of Virginia. And you can see where the red spots are. These are what were ultimately called the deaneries, or big spots of population. And these were many of the concert locations were. So you can see that they traveled from the northern panhandle all the way down to Bristol, Virginia for their concerts. And they traveled by cooperative bus. I remember these buses when I was a kid, going to downtown Wheeling with my grandmother. And the bus driver was Frank Stauffer. And they said that he drove 1,500 miles for these Stauffer, Stauffer. And so here is a table of the two seasons of 64 and 65 and where they sang. And I wanted to display this for a couple reasons. One is you can see these were many times evening concerts. And when you look at the programs, and you have some examples of the programs on your tables, it was a long program. It wasn't just a 45-minute program. It was a long program. So they were there for a long time. You can also see that they were traveling sometimes on Sunday, mostly on Sunday, sometimes on Saturday. The most unusual place that they traveled to was Alderson, where they sang at the reformatory for women, the prison. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. Now, in April, Bishop Hodges attended the April 5th, the 11th, and the 12th concerts, and that's in 1964. And so that would have been Wheeling, and Huntington. So he was supportive also in body because he attended the concerts too. Oh my goodness, I better speed up or we're never going to get done. All right, now is our first time to listen to something. So we are first going to listen to There Is a Balm in Gilead.
To
Now, we don't have a lot of time to talk about these, so I'll just say quickly. That was sung a cappella. Now, I've sung a cappella in a quartet, or there was 42 people singing a cappella is incredible. And it's almost like an ethereal sound to it, and it's simple but yet inspirational. I think it was just a lovely, lovely piece. All right, there we go. So the first concert, what happens? It's a sellout. It's a sellout. They are lined up in the hallways. They are lined up all through Glessner Auditorium. They get a 15-minute standing ovation. And put on a second concert right after it, and in the second season they end up doing the same thing. This is you've got examples on your tables here. These are examples of the program. You can see how big the program was, how long the program was, how big it was. This is from 64. There's another one, 65. This is the 64 group. And Kim says that's your dad right there. That's Jack Randolph right there. All right, let's listen to selection 2. Jesus Rex Admirabilis. I apologize for murdering that Latin. Again, we had a cappella, and the lower voices, the way the lower voices supported all of the other voices, just absolutely outstanding. I mean, it's just, the body and the depth to this piece is just incredible, and it was just very, 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 very lovely. So then we go to 1964. We've got a letter from Mother Mary Ruth who says, we're going to do this again. We're going to have a tour in 1965. This time, Jack Randolph is going to direct the tryouts, as you can see from the letter. And they're going to also, I think, try to concentrate more people in Wheeling instead of throughout the diocese, because it was just probably more practical to do that. So this is the 1965 group. And you have this also on your tables. By the way, the things that are on your tables you're welcome to take. And also I have cards up here with my email address on. If there's something that you would like to have had that there wasn't enough, just email me. I'll be glad to send it to you. So there are 40 sisters in the 1965 group. Here's what they look like on stage. You see the panels are different for the 65 season. The program, though, is a little bit different. It's still, there's a lot there, but you see it's a lot more contemporary music. And when I asked the sisters, when I met with them up at Mount St. Joseph, what kind of music did they like to sing? They said, we like the popular music. Actually, before they put this program together, when they were doing the press releases, they actually asked people to send in suggestions for pieces they would like to hear. So we could not find any evidence that any of those were ever sent in, but they offered people that opportunity. But when you go back and look at you see, let me turn my page here so I don't have to get up on the stage. There is music from Rodgers and Hammerstein, Sound of Music, from Mary Poppins. Now there's also some other, from Carousel. There are also, in all these concerts, there's a folk group that sings, and Sister Weisskircher, I know, was in the folk group. Were any of the rest of you in the folk group? Yes? Okay. And then there was an a cappella group and a chamber ensemble in 65. So, again, a varied concert. All right, let's listen to another piece. And this came from their 45 RPM. They did a 45 record and an LP. And this one is an African-American spiritual called Good News in the Kingdom.
Good news in the kingdom, and I won't die no more. Good news in the kingdom, and I won't die no more. I saw St. Peter on the sea, and I won't die no more. He left his nets and followed me, and I won't die no more. Good news in the kingdom, and I won't die no more. Good news in the kingdom, and I won't die no more. I do believe without a doubt, and I won't die no more. The Christian has a right to shout, and I won't die no more. Good news in the kingdom, and I won't die no more. Good news in the kingdom, and I won't die no more. I feel the Spirit moving me, and I won't die no more. I'm going to join the Jubilee, and I won't die no more. Good news in the kingdom, and I won't die no more. Good news in the kingdom, and I won't die no more.
Sister Weisskircher, was that you on the guitar? Yes, yes. The harmonies were great, the guitar was the star, and it was just a joyful, joyful song. So then as I said before, one of their trips was to the reformatory in Alderson, West Virginia. Your dad did not direct in the women's reformatory. One of the sisters did. But the quote from the warden here I think is interesting. The music, of course, was the point of emphasis, but I am of the opinion more than just the music made lasting impression. I feel the company of dedicated spiritual servants giving of themselves in such a beautiful expression of peace, love, and happiness will long be remembered even after the tuneful phrases and catchy meters have been forgotten. Now, isn't that lovely? Now, lest you think they were in some grand accommodations, this is where they rehearsed, down in the basement of the Mother House. And this is where they did the recordings. They didn't go to a recording studio. Some of the stories say they placed mattresses up against the windows and did some, which is kind of why you don't hear a real professional sound in some of these recordings. But that's Jack Randolph. I think one of them's Barbara Moran. Do any of you recognize any of the other sisters? Who else do we have in the picture? No? Nope. All right. So an LP is produced, and news says that the LP was produced at, the record was produced at the request of people who wanted to get a record of them. It was produced in St. Clairsville. I'm not sure why Mr. Black did not get involved with this one, but it did not sell well. It was not a big seller. There are still bits and pieces. Every once in a while, one will turn up, and there's a newspaper article up here with an interview once when they found one. So, and then the folk singers also did their own record. And you just heard the folk singers with the guitar, and here they are in concert. And here you see some of the names in the picture. And then there's the folk singers record. It was a 45. It wasn't an LP. And they titled it Songs from the West Virginia Hills, so you can see that it's a different type of music. It's not necessarily sacred music. Now we're going to hear our last piece, which is from the 45 RPM. And this is a piece that's very joyful and different, and it's a folk song, and it's called Cindy, or Get Along Home, Cindy, Cindy. Oops.
Get along home, get along home, get along home, Cindy, Cindy, get along home, Cindy, Cindy, get along home, Cindy, Cindy, I'll marry you sometime. Get along home, Cindy, Cindy, get along home, Cindy, Cindy, get along home, Cindy, Cindy, I'll marry you sometime. I wish I was an apple, get along apple tree, get along every time Cindy first would take a bite of me. Get along, she told me that she loved me, get along, told me she would come. Get along, from her eyes, around me, get along, find her come. Get along home, oh, get along, Cindy, get along home, oh, get along, Cindy, get along home, oh, get along, Cindy, I'll marry you sometime. Get along home, 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 I'll marry you sometime. She took me to the parlor, get along, told me to her bed. Get along, swore that I would hurt his fingers, take her for her bed. Get along, I wish I was a needle, get along, fine as I could sew. Get along, how I know, I will take her down, how I go. Get along home, oh, get along, Cindy, get along home, oh, get along, Cindy, get along home, oh, get along, Cindy, I'll marry you sometime. Get along home, get along home, get along home, get along, Cindy, get along home, get along home, I'll marry you sometime. Oh, Cindy, no religion, she always be Cindy, but when she heard the open door, she pressed my love like that. It's Cindy in the springtime, it's Cindy in the Cindy. If I could have a Cindy girl, I would get it home. Get along home, oh, get along, Cindy, get along home, oh, get along, Cindy, get along home, oh, get along, Cindy, I'll marry you sometime. Get along home, 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 I'll marry you sometime. Get along home, get along home, get along home, get along home.
Certainly a different piece there. Now, when I went up to the mountain and was talking to some of the sisters who were there, they said, well, did you know we were invited to the Ed Sullivan Show? We were invited to perform on the Ed Sullivan Show, but we couldn't go because it cost too much money. They said, well, did you know we were invited to perform on the Ed Sullivan Show, but we couldn't go because it cost too much money. They said, well, did you know? Oh, turn to thank you. Sound like Polly Parrott there. So we tried to investigate this, and it's an interesting story because at the same time, first of all, we could not confirm it. You're likely only to confirm people who performed, for one thing. And secondly, we had Sister Mary Immaculate, who was working out of the New York area. She's writing letters to Ed Sullivan, and in one of the letters, the copy is up here, where she's chastising him about Cardinal Spellman, and he should get this group on his show. And so there's a bit of a disconnect that you got Sister Immaculate writing these letters, promoting, getting them on the show, yet you don't have the money if you get the invitation to go. So somewhere the truth is probably in between there. I'm not sure. Do any of you know what happened there? No? Anyway, it's interesting. But Sister Immaculate was writing to Ed Sullivan, Chet Huntley, David Brinkley, and NBC News, telling them that, they need to stop talking about all this poor Appalachia crap and get some good singers who can show what the state's really about. So I mentioned briefly the sisters did have other assignments. This is what they were doing while they also were singing. They were teachers, principals, students, nurses, support workers, child care ministers, the domestic ministry, both teachers and students, and when there was none for. So they were busy people while they were doing all of this. So what happened? Well, they ended up having a net profit for both series of both concerts of $36,501.76, which is not shabby back in the 1960s. But there's a little more to add to the message. And that is the Friends also had the Ginny 2 review. Do you remember that? So yeah. And they did it around the state, and they raised $18,000. So we ended up raising $54,501 for this fund. And I went and did the math, or the computer did the math. The equivalent in purchasing power today of that money would be $546,951. So they had the equivalent of $500,000 that they raised for the vocational and educational fund, which I think is incredible. So, when I titled this presentation, Margaret Brandon said to me, "What are you talking about, harmonious investigation?" I said, well, I'm trying to get people's interest, but let's just explain just a little bit. First of all, the very physical, musical performances, the harmonies and the beauty of that. The relationships within the choral groups between the sisters, there's harmony and beauty in that. And then there is also this relationship in the broader community. In one of the programs, the sisters thanked the community for supporting them, including the Jewish community, because it couldn't have been done without everyone. And so an editorial, I want to read just an excerpt from an editorial in the newspaper that was talking about the impact of this. And it said, and there was a big deal also about Jack Randolph being a minister of music in the Methodist Church, leading a Catholic group. There was a lot of publicity about that. So the editors of the newspaper said in an editorial, with the Ministry of Music of Christ Methodist Church directing a group of Catholic nuns in a vocal program before a rapt, non-sectarian audience, we know that religious togetherness is a living thing. Now, isn't that harmony in our community? And that, my friends, is the Sisters of St. Joseph, singing Sisters of St. Joseph. Are there any questions?
If you do have a question, raise your hand, and I will come to you with the mic.
I was interested in the a cappella music, but that's what we heard at first. So I was wondering later, when you had the piano, who played the piano then?
It was Sister Burke sometimes was the pianist, right? There were a couple pianists that they had. She's pointing to someone back there. I can't see.
Awesome.
I'll go back.
Charlotte Burke, Sister Charlotte Burke.
Okay.
Eileen O'Connor. And they were involved with the tryouts, as you remember, in that first section.
Any other questions or comments?
She had one here.
Okay. Who had their hand up?
Right here.
I just wanted to say that my late husband attended to the props that the singing sisters, when they went on tour. And I have one of the albums that first album that was published. I still have that. And I want to thank you and the sisters because it was absolutely beautiful.
Thank you. And I have those names. There were a couple people who went around in that truck and toted them and took care of them for the venues. Margaret has.
Thank you. I was in the second group. I was too young for the first group. Margaret Brennan here. I was only 22. We didn't know what we were doing. That was 61 years ago. I mean, I can hardly believe it. But I will tell you how I learned to sing, and it was Jack Randolph. Kim's father was something else. We were blessed. When you heard the clips, the professional level of that singing was all because of Jack Randolph. And he was tough as nails. He gave no quarter. You had to be on your game. Well, of course, he knew he only had X amount of hours to do the work. But he was just excellent. And I still carry some of what he taught us. We became real singers. My uncle Jack was a performer in the Elks Minstrel, and he came up the first concert. He said, "I can't believe you were that good." He did, and it's like we were pretty darn good, as you could hear.
Now the crew that I had, follow up to your question, written down, it's Phil Petrello and Alan Pack. Was one of them your husband? Phil Petrello. And they hired them right out of Central Catholic High School because they were strong, strapping graduates of Central. He loved every minute of it? That's great. That's great. That's great.
Can you repeat what she said?
He
Chuck?
remained friends with one of the sisters who is still living,
Yes, Sister Joyce Waltz.
Sister Joyce Waltz.
Thank you, Chuck.
I just wondered if they ever made CDs from the long-playing albums. And
Not that I know of.
that's a shame.
yeah.
Should have been.
Now, there are audio files, bits and pieces of, you can find them out on the internet and other places.
My comment is, I sang with Jack before he met the sisters, because I was a 4-H kid, and he helped us before he met the sisters.
Anybody else have a question or comment?
Microphone's coming.
You talked about those 2 years. How long did the sisters sing, and what happened?
Well, they sang just for those 2 tours in 1964 and 65. That was it. They broke up after that.
Was there a reason?
Well, they were just worn out, I think, because they were trying to do everything,
Okay,
you know,
thank
on bus rides and do the regular trip. Is that correct, sisters? You were just worn out? We might make the money, but we don't want to kill them in the process.
So I was only 5 and 6 years old when this all occurred, but that was when Vatican II was coming out, and if you think about it, and the contemporary music, I mean, you would understand why then they were enjoying it. And the other is, I think they were very good at their fundraising, because I remember going up there and to the festivals, and I think the festivals might have took off after that, or were the festivals done way before? They were always going on, yeah.
The festivals helped pay for some of the debt, I know, on the building, so they were going on before the concert started.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Other questions?
Sisters, since I'm back here, do you ladies have any comments or questions?
Well, I know the sisters do want to sing a piece for us before we go.
I just want to give one little tidbit. One evening after we had finished weekend rehearsals, Sunday evening, we were driving back to Fairmont. We were teaching in Fairmont, and we were driving back, and that was before the interstates. So we were on, what, 250? I think 250
Windy
goes to Fairmont. 250. And we ran into a snowstorm. But we had to be back to teach the next morning. So we made it, but Sister Mary Jean was a good driver, so we got back. But that's one thing I never forget. Thank you.
Well, the sisters have asked to share a parting song with us, the group that came today from Mount St. Joseph. So, sisters, it's over to you.
I'd just like to tell you, we're going to sing a hymn that we use all the time, particularly as we say goodbye to our sisters after they've passed away. It's called Sancte Joseph, and it's in Latin, but I'm going to tell you what the words mean. It's Saint Joseph, and we repeat that. Sancte Joseph, ora pro nobis, pray for us now and at the hour of our death. So that's the piece that we'd like to sing. And if you know it, please join with us, or come, we'll do it twice, so maybe you can join the second time. Okay? Ready? Sancte Joseph, Sancte Joseph, Sancte Joseph, ora pro nobis, nunc et in hora mortis, nunc et in hora mortis, Sancte Joseph, ora pro nobis. Join us if you will. Sancte Joseph, Sancte Joseph, Sancte Joseph, ora pro nobis, nunc et in hora mortis, nunc et in hora mortis, Sancte Joseph, ora pro nobis.
Another standing ovation for the singing sisters. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.